Police Chief Flynn speaks out on violent crime in Milwaukee, how the city is responding to a new state law restricting local control of rental properties, and why flexible scheduling might be the key to attracting and retaining city employees. This is Council Rewind, and I'm Robin DiGiacinto. Alderman Donovan is hosting a series of special meetings with civic leaders to start a conversation about violent crime in Milwaukee. The first session focused on the role of police in addressing gun violence, car thefts, and the importance of building trust within the community. On June 6th, the Public Safety Committee heard more from Police Chief Flynn.
So out of these meetings, it's our hope that something substantive comes, that we can walk away from these meetings having a better understanding of the challenges that each one of these departments is faced with and what we can do to help improve their effectiveness.
Now, as of the first quarter of this year, our homicide rate was 20% below last year. As of right now, it's 32% behind last year's pace. Our robberies were 1% up at the end of the first quarter. As of today, our robberies are down 6%. Homicide primary factors from 2006 to the present, overwhelmingly, the number one is argument and fight. Retaliation is really another iteration of that. So more than a third of our homicides, the primary factor is an ongoing beef. As we've dug into the numbers, overwhelmingly these beefs are between people with significant criminal records. The DV, domestic violence homicide rate, has remained steady over those years. From January 1st to May 16th, a year and a half, we arrested 703 different juveniles for operating without owner's consent. During this time, 130 juveniles were arrested 2 or more times. 27 juvenile offenders were arrested 4 or more times, and 2 offenders were arrested 6 times for this charge. We can catch them, but if nothing happens to them in terms of either services or sanctions, they're right back on the street doing the same thing again. So we've been unable to create a strong disincentive for actions that right now bring them approval of their peer group and some status in some segments of society. We've debriefed juveniles as part of our arrest process. And interesting, there's a profit motive in stealing cars, which they can sell them to drug dealers to use as mobile drug houses. Newer models with keys are preferred. There's a street cred issue. Immature boys want to impress immature girls, and this seems to help them do that. That's nothing new. It goes back to that part of it, goes back to the 50s. Joyriding. There's a lot of stealing just for transportation, but we've also seen an increase in the use of these stolen cars as mobile robbery platforms. Since 2010, there has been a 396% increase in the number of juveniles arrested for operating without the owner's consent. Now, as you know, it's virtually impossible to get somebody charged with actually stealing the car, because when we catch them in the car, it only means they were driving the car. Just the way it is. We can't, unless we catch them in the act of stealing the car, we're stuck with the OWOC charge. But I think it's significant that not only have we had a 396% increase in the number of juveniles arrested for that crime, we've had a 72% increase just in the first 5 months of this year compared to the first 5 months of last year. We've had a pretty stunning increase in the number of juveniles arrested for carjacking. The number of juveniles arrested for robbery has gone up 27%, and the number of juvenile arrests for armed robbery has gone up by 2/3 just in 1 year. We arrested 6 people over the weekend for a double carjacking, and there was a pursuit. And we arrested 6 people. They were all juveniles. One was as young as 12, and of the 6, 4 of them were on county supervision. As you know, last week we had a similar situation in which we had 3 people under arrest for a carjacking. All 3 of them were under county supervision.
Walk us through precisely what happens to most of these juveniles when they're arrested, let's say for auto theft. Okay, they're in police custody. Take it from there, Chief.
When we make an arrest for auto theft, we will process that adult or juvenile at a district station. In the case of a juvenile, that person is then conveyed to the Children's Center and processed through the Children's Center. Very often, they are returned home with a future court date. And when the chief talks about up to 6 months before the initial court appearance, that's what could happen when we process them, take them out to the center, and the center decides to give them a future court date.
So typically, how long does that take? Let's say we make an arrest at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Are you telling me that sometime that same day or evening, in most cases, that juvenile is back out on the street?
In many cases, that juvenile is released within 24 hours. We don't have the data to say how long exactly they're held, but in some cases, they're released right away. In some cases, they're released the next morning.
And are those decisions made as to who they're released to? And what are the options typically that might be available? Who makes that decision and what options do they have?
The county makes that decision at the Children's Center, and it's generally made, I believe, through the human services workers who process the cases out there.
So these are social workers?
Yes.
And it's clear to us that this became a fad among a segment of the juvenile population who perceived that there were no consequences for high-status behavior. Engaging in this behavior gave them status in certain segments of the community, certainly among members of their peer group. There was no disincentive, all right? And so that's our challenge. I mean, the case I was alluding to, this is the night before last. We had a double carjacking. A group of kids jacked 2 cars. We got in their pursuit, caught them, 6 kids. 4 of them are on county parent home supervision. The first one, who's on parent home supervision since April 4th, was arrested January 21st for operating an auto without owner's consent and fleeing. Another person in the car, who's 12 years old, all right, has been missing for 2 weeks under parent care and has been missing 8 times. His first arrest was at age 11 for attempted motor vehicle theft. He has 8 prior Milwaukee police arrests.
When these kids go through the system, who's letting them go through the system? We got way too many marshmallow judges and marshmallow people that are not following through, and this community cannot accept it anymore. And there has to be consequences for all of us. We're held accountable. Why aren't these damn kids being held accountable?
Is there a way of building a bridge with the court system specifically, be specific about a recommendation that they could do in communicating with the police department so that you know that the most prolific offenders have some sort of communication with the police department about their release?
Well, thank you, President Hamilton. One of the challenges for us, and at this point it's really less the judiciary than it really is the bureaucratic management of the organization, is there seems to be a great reluctance on the part of the Children's Center to share information with us about people's status on supervision, particularly those that are on GPS. I didn't bring with me stories of offenders we've locked up wearing their ankle bracelets, but we have. And our challenge is that for reasons we really quite can't fathom, and we've had these discussions, they don't want to give us real-time information about where these young people are who are supposedly on supervision. Now, since the county does not monitor the ankle bracelets 24 hours a day, they don't have a 24-hour contract. So nobody knows where these kids are overnight, all right? And we can't find out
As you know, Chief, at the Mayor Ceasefire Sabbath breakfast, you spoke. And one of the components of what you said was the 4 rules to not get shot in Milwaukee. Don't be part of a crime, gang, or crew. Don't be a drug dealer. Don't illegally carry a gun. And finally, if you are in an argument with a stranger, ask them how often they've been arrested. Now, as I saw that, and as several of my colleagues saw, and some of the people that we represent, we were disturbed by those comments.
I'd like to start with the idea that after 8.5 years, I've established some base level of the notion of goodwill, all right? That my tenure here has demonstrated that I care very much about this community, that I care very much about the violence in this community. And as you certainly know, I've been at more than my share of crime scenes of dead children to demonstrate my deep and abiding concern for the innocent victims of violence. So as we analyzed the numbers then, just as we did when we got here, we found very clear clusters of the vast majority of our person-on-person violence. It was overwhelmingly there, as here, as in Chicago, concentrated among people who are engaged in volitional behavior, all right? They are engaged in behavior that puts them at risk. And what I tried to do was come up with a way in community meetings to convey this in a way in which a group of neighbors engaged in law-abiding behavior would hear this information differently than a dry recitation of the facts. It's been an attempt on my part to try to convey to people the realities of the concentration of violence among folks who've made bad choices. And that's not most of the people, even in our most violent neighborhoods. That's my goal. And if my communication style interfered with that goal, then I simply won't use it anymore.
I get finding creative ways to communicate messages. We all have done it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But this is bigger than just that message or being caught on the news saying it or people taking offense to it. Because of the great position that you hold, the impact of the things that you say is huge on the people that we're serving.
The committee also heard from Milwaukee County District Attorney John Chisholm on June 10th and will hold additional meetings as the summer continues. A new state law stands to severely restrict local control over rental properties. Under Wisconsin Act 176, the city will lose tools to hold landlords accountable for repeat building code violations. The city could also face a revenue loss of up to $5 million. On June 9th, the Zoning, Neighborhoods, and Development Committee discussed a proposal attempting to minimize projected losses.
You're correct. This legislation that you've sponsored is really in response to the Wisconsin Act 176, which took effect in March of this year, and really limits what municipalities can do in the form of regulating rental properties and in a city. And this particular legislation from the state prevents the city and will eliminate the city's residential rental inspection program, which is our targeted program that had been in the UWM, Lindsay Heights area, yes, and also a small area in Alderman Bowles district, Lindsay Park, excuse me. That program is basically, we have to eliminate it. Also, our Certificate of Code Compliance program, which is a program that's citywide for rental, non-owner occupied 1- and 2-family properties. It also really removes our enforcement tools for the Building Code Nuisance Property Code Ordinance, which was 8012. It takes away the leverage that we had under that ordinance to bring landlords to the table to correct problems at their properties. This ordinance also will restrict the information that we can collect under our property recording ordinance. And then finally, it also restricts what we can do, as Chairman Bold explained, our reinspection fee program. And currently, that's a
It had been a program where the fees escalated with noncompliance in successive re-inspections. Where the state legislation prevents us from having that escalation, we can only charge a maximum of twice what the original reinspection fee was. This legislation is recommending that we revise our reinspection fee structure to go from what had been a 60, 75, 200, and 350 escalated fee structure to a more simple 100, 200 fee structure, which of course brings us into compliance with the state code.
Almost 2/3 of the charges are the 350. So that just tells you that what we're dealing with is a lot of violations that are not getting abated and not getting abated in a timely manner. But the state law now limits us to we cannot increase any reinspection fee more than twice the original amount. So we're kind of limited significantly by that because we don't want to have a huge initial reinspection fee for a lot of the property owners that are going to abate in a timely manner. So I think the 100 and 200, which is changed to, is reasonable. But just for the record, if we're looking at 2017, if we didn't make any changes in the reinspection fee, we'd be looking at a revenue loss of $5 million as a result of the legislation. And the only thing in the legislation that we have any discretion over really is the reinspection fee. So the adjustment in the reinspection fee will reduce that revenue loss both this year, but particularly next year.
Because in the end, our ultimate goal is compliance. We have neighbors and others who look at a building that is deteriorating and they have an investment there. They want to see the issues resolved. They want to see a building improve. We want to do it for safety in addition to security. So there's a public safety, a public health, public good aspect to it. And in the end, our ultimate goal is to gain compliance. Now, if someone has $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 worth of improvements to make based on orders, and the best we can do is generate twice a month at $200 each reinspection fees. We're talking about $400 a month or $4,800 a year at max, if we're maxing it out. And there are many others who will look at that and say, I'm not going to touch a $40,000 or $50,000 improvement on this large building. I'll just pay $4,800 in fines. And for some of those individuals, there wasn't enough deterrent with the 350. Certainly it becomes more and more difficult when we nearly have that.
Are the landlords still offered the opportunity to participate in the code compliance program?
Certificate of Code Compliance is one of the programs that would be eliminated.
No, not that one. Our code compliance, where you can use money to fix your property up.
Oh, yeah, there's a variety of strong neighborhood and other programs that are available. The rental rehab program through NIDC or DCD's NIDC.
Right. You're talking about incentive programs.
Yeah,
so they still have opportunity.
Yeah. Correct.
Do they state, no, we still have opportunity, that we give opportunity to these landlords to repair their property and get into code?
Right.
I mean, we're fair.
We let's put it this way. I think a fair way to summarize this is we continue to have the ability to utilize a carrot. It's our stick that was taken away, or at least is partially being shortened.
It was very clear, and you'll see in the legislation, what they found to be profoundly unfair to them is when we had programs on the books that solely targeted rental properties and not owner-occupied properties. And so the legislation clearly says we can have a program if we apply it citywide, but not like RRI, which was targeted to very specific neighborhoods. So if we chose to, we could, obviously, and the argument was really you're advocating for us expanding a government program, but obviously the cost and the necessity of that.
Did you tell them if they wanted the benefit of being an owner-occupant in Milwaukee, they could move to Milwaukee?
Yeah, right.
Right.
And ultimately, what's going to be described here is a continuation of the state statutes eviscerating local control over a number of issues. And, ultimately, we will see our ability to tackle a number of DNS matters severely eroded with this. So it is begrudgingly, I did that in order to make sure that it was one, scheduled, but two, we needed to act on this as well too, because not only is our ability to continue programs like the rental reinspection and a number of other areas here in handling routine business and dealing with issues of problems, homes being gutted severely, but our ability to generate even revenues from reinspection fees from various programs has been gutted as well too. This is actually a method of trying to slap a Band-Aid on it and stop the bleeding as much as we can. So with that being said, I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea that because my name is on this here that I'm elated in any way, shape, or form with the state mandates that are coming down that continue to erode our local control. It is quite the contrary. It is just a means of getting this moving forward and actually stemming what would otherwise be a continued erosion of city dollars that would otherwise happen as a result of the mandate that curbs our ability to garner reinspection fees and to generate fees from a few other programs that we currently run.
The measure passed with the unanimous support of the Common Council. In an attempt to attract and retain employees, city department heads may soon be able to offer flexible work arrangements, including part-time hours and telecommuting. The rule change has been in the works since March, when the Department of Employee Relations started drafting guidelines. On June 8th, the Finance and Personnel Committee considered the updated proposal.
Back in March of this year, the Common Council directed the Department of Employee Relations, following the lead of Alderman Bohl, who's joining us at the table, and Alderman Murphy, to create the infrastructure necessary to create alternative work schedules and alternative staffing models so that the city could be in a better position to attract and retain people who are looking not only for a job with, some serious responsibilities, but the ability to balance those responsibilities with their personal lives. And what we're trying to do is create the authority in the Milwaukee Code for departments when they're able to consider those models. And it could be part-time, it could be flexible schedules, it could be alternative work schedules, it could be telecommuting.
The only thing that I will tell you, and I do appreciate the leadership on this, I think it is very important for us to provide flexible scheduling and alternative models, particularly when we're looking to attract and retain employment now moving forward. We know that the millennial generation values much more flexibility, or at least that's everything that I've read. In the city, we simply don't compete at the same level we do with benefits that we used to. I mean, there were times where with certain professions here at the city, you would earn less money, but you were always assured of a stellar pension and stellar benefits, and we are no longer running at Cadillac levels. And so our ability to retain, let alone attract folks, I think we really need to look at providing a quality of a scheduling, the ability for folks to flex their work. Obviously, this may work better in some departments and some divisions than others, but I think that what we need to do is we need to push the envelope with everyone to really look and consider this. I know there are some folks who might turn out and say, I don't think that this would work for the police department. I think quite the contrary. I think that there's certain methods. You don't necessarily have an officer that's going to work 4 hours and then pull the squad around and be done for the shift and patrolling that area in the end of the day. But you could have someone that would be a .6 and someone who would be a .4. You could have somebody who would do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Monday, Tuesday, Friday, and have somebody who would do Wednesday and Thursday and complement. You would have complements there. So there is the ability to work out those arrangements in all departments and all divisions.
I think there's a very creative and thoughtful way to address an increasing demand of our workforce. And also, I think it's very understanding about our families in our community and the importance of raising children in our community, and recognizes that some people, have priorities, and shockingly, sometimes priorities are not just our jobs. I think this recognizes that.
Just for clarification purposes, this isn't just for higher department heads? This will filter down to the lower levels as well, or is this specifically for, the flexibility is specifically for higher level?
The flexibility would be for the entire workforce. Collective bargaining, groups that have collective bargaining, there might be some implications there that are not as open as groups that don't have collective bargaining, but it would be for everybody. It's up to the appointing authority and the department head to consider and implement based on the business operations. So just because we're creating the infrastructure doesn't mean that it's going to work in every single department.
But that also, Madam Chair, that also may be a good thing or bad thing. Again, how some departments may turn around and say, I love this idea, and I'm going to jump over backwards and do cartwheels to try to implement this as much as possible because I see the benefit, and yet you may have others who will turn and say, well, that's nice, I don't see any opportunities here, and just hand back a report saying, no can do. It doesn't provide us a benefit. We should try to promote as much, and I want to give the opportunity to departments. But that is why I think that we do need to have the flexibility coming back. I understand what Ms. Monteagudo is saying here. The first reporting doesn't have to be something that comes back until, next spring and provides opportunity to get a review and have her to ascertain some data, and then you can be on an annual basis from there. I mean, we can roll that out, 8 months, and I think that'll provide sufficient time.
So this is an excellent idea, guys. I just want to commend you on this, and I'd like to see it get started as soon as possible. Is there any provisions in here regarding employees who've been on the job for a certain amount of time who need help with a new system or a new way of doing things or new duties, and they can't keep up with the documentation and the reporting requirements of a new system? Is there anything in here to help with them training so they don't fall behind and start to get documented?
No, this is not really designed to address those issues. I think there might be some onboarding and on-the-job training issues that some departments are better at than other departments. I think if employees are having difficulty keeping up with the demands of their jobs, they should go to the chain of command within their department. They can always come to our department, and we can try to facilitate and mediate a resolution before it gets to discipline. At this point, I'm assuming that this is approved by the council, the intent would be to share the information with the department heads, also share the information with the employee reps, because this is definitely going to be something that they're going to have an interest in, and then come back and have a final policy and a guideline available to distribute to the departments, and then give them a couple of months to get used to the idea, and then do a survey back of those departments asking, what have you done? Has something actually worked in the department? Tell us the good stories and the stories that, there might be departments that are going to say, basically, this is not possible. We don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the equipment, we don't have the accountability structure. So we want to do a survey. After that survey is done, I'm happy to come back to the committee and report, and you can either direct me to come back and report, or you can amend the substitute right now. So either way, I'm happy to come back and report to you.
The measure was passed with the unanimous support of the Common Council. That's a look back at some of the important issues for the most recent Common Council cycle. For the City Channel and Council Rewind, I'm Robin DiGiacinto.